Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Another cast over coming at you. This time we're going to be taking a look at a match between Art of Turtle and Newt. Now, if you've been around in the Brood War space for a while, you'll know Art of Turtle. He is our Zerg player in the top right of Axiom by Biddy B. And in the bottom left, we have his opponent, Newt, a Class 1 Terran, newly minted as Class 1 following the conclusion of March Invitational B, which was an exciting tournament that I think you all should take a look at if you haven't seen it already. But Art of Turtle is, of course, an old head from way back, a classic name in the Brood War community. If you're one of those foreigner enthusiasts who follow the North American scene at all, you'll definitely have heard of this guy, maybe rub shoulders with him, some lands, stuff like that. And he is new to Cosmonarchy, but he's excited about it. He's very bullish on it, in fact. He thinks that it's a cool thing to check out. So he will be playing a Zerg here. Of course, I had to get the Zerg here in. That being said, his opponent, Newt, is a formidable foe, has been grinding out the games, and is already starting his Fulcrum. I've actually played a number of matches as Zerg against some of our Terran players in preparation for the upcoming Gauntlet qualifier for Acropolis #1. I was going to say Ascension, but that's the old name for it. It does have a group stage that's very similar to the Ascension tournaments of eons past. So you might check that out as well later on. In April, we're going to be kicking off the group stage. But in a little while, actually, we're going to be kicking off none other than that fanciful time where we talk about the Gauntlet stage, where we cast all those games. And it's going to be a fun time. It's going to be a fun time. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And the reason why I was bringing that up, fighting against Terrans, is because actually we have some Terrans. But Newt has a very practiced build. He likes to go Fulcrum into Quarry. And I think he might be leaving a little something on the table by choosing to omit the Stockade and not go Bio, even against Zerg. Admittedly, he hasn't practiced against Zerg too much, so he's maybe a little bit reliant on one strategy over another. He did do a cheeky little Stockade rush in Invitational B, so he has done some bio play in tournament play, but a lot of the times it was very cheeky, all-in cheesy stuff, as opposed to what you might expect. The pool is nearly complete for our Zerg competitor, and so too is his macro hatch. I say macro hatch, it is of course an expansion, and the Vulture will be here momentarily. We immediately have 3 pairs of Quasilisks, and wisely, he turns that larva into something immediately using his egg. The reason why that is very important is because larvae do not have the same armor values that they did in the past. Their armor is only 5, so they will take maybe, I think, 2 hits, maximum 3 hits from the Vultures before they end up going down. Now, Art of Turtle needs to get a jump on the Mason here. They thankfully was able to clear that. Wasn't able to score any other hits, but also, thankfully, he ended up keeping his Quasilisk egg surviving. The main thing about that is that if it had been focused down a little bit earlier by Newt, like one attack earlier, I think it would have actually fallen. So pretty thin margins there. Art playing a little bit around the extremities of what is possible. These Vultures might seek to go straight past this Circuit and get right into the main base, but maybe he's huffing around, sniffing around, thinking, wait a second, my opponent's trying to attack me with those Quasis. Where are they? So 3 Vultures in the middle of the map. They did not lay any mines. There is a treasury about to go down, or at least there was a treasury about to go down, but it looks like Newt has to scramble here a little bit while Art of Turtle back at home thinks about macro hatching it up by his choke point. He's going to go ahead and drop that as his Quasis stretch on forward. A very wounded Vulture has made it all the way back home and might be able to set up for the kill here. However, this Mason on the low ground is not going to happen, and you can see the mines being put down here. It's very obvious what Newt is thinking. He wants to see if he can choke out Art of Turtle's Quasis. They don't move very fast, so the Vultures can pick them apart despite the range. But with a little bit of stutter stepping and maybe a loss of control here for Newt, you might actually see a couple of these Vultures go down. Looks like instead, though, no, actually, that one might hit. No, baited into the mine. Not going to happen. I was going to say, it's very, very close. 2 more hits and it would have been done. You could actually say 3 more hits for this Vulture over here. We might get some repairs going as Newt has been held. His aggression been stymied, and the worker counts identical as more and more hatches are being added to the fray. Going up to 4 hatch in 2 base. 2 base eco is pretty good in Cosmonarchy, compared to Brood War. It's not nearly as bad as you would think. And with the extra defenses that we have over here covering for run-bys, we're pretty sure that if we're in Art of Turtle's case, we're not going to worry too much about any additional Vulture play. But they have been repaired, and we are going to see a bit of a transfer of attention as the anchor gets into position. Yes, it does lift off in Cosmonarchy. No, you can't shoot out of it while it's doing that. It's going to be a little bit of a quasi-push here, it looks like, and this is a little bit open and vulnerable to the heavy mech units that you can make. But another thing to point out is that even though we've got a Madrigal coming, which is actually anti-air until it deploys, and then it's anti-crowd, I guess, but you need to peel for it, it's not the most invulnerable of choices. We have an Ovoleth coming as well for our Zerg player. He's going to use that to scout around, maybe even do a cheeky drop, judging by the way that he's positioning his quasis. I know that he's also very... a little bit paranoid about air attacks. And you can see here the vultures are indeed sharking around looking for a worker. One of them does end up going down. Quasis are here now to finish the job. Not sure what that Mason was going to accomplish, but he ends up biting the dust as well. Watchdog dispatched towards the top right. And a stockade being added as the Ministry finishes, instantly going into the quarry. So mines are going to reveal the pattern that we have over here, and the Watchdog as well going to be used as a sort of flying scout. All the buildings in Terran can lift off here in Cosmonarchy, unless it's an add-on, in which case you can at least self-destruct it. Now, this Watchdog's going to get caught in the middle of the map. That's a little bit unfortunate for Newt, because he's not going to have any idea about what kind of tech his opponent has. We can see over here, though, that Art of Turtle is thinking about maybe taking another expansion, judging by the mineral float. Grabs a bunch of workers, and otherwise is keeping on to a Tier 2 rush. So that's what we're going to see out of him. Typically, you'll see a 10-minute timer before Zerg can usually end up going for Tier 2. But in this particular case, it looks like Art of Turtle wants to be on the map active. And he's going to ingratiate himself to this Madrigal. Not actually losing a single worker, which is, or a single Quasilisk, I should say, which is pretty good. And we even have Cyprians manning the anchor for the purposes of warding off any additional attacks. When you burrow a unit in Cosmonarchy, it gains double HP regen. So that can be something that we'll actually notice over here. You can see the HP rising a lot faster, whereas if we click on this wounded one, it's going a lot slower. So that's just one little thing that it can achieve. The Ovoleth is here, but we're not going to see any drops just yet, as the Quasis are just going to be leaving a little bit of a breadcrumb trail across the whole map. A lot of workers over here ready to respond to any commands if Art of Turtle wants to saturate his main or natural. He's a little undersaturated, actually, in a couple of these locations. It looks like he's got good saturation for his natural, but really poor mineral saturation in the main. So he's going to rectify that. He had a lot of mineral float anyway. Immediately gets a lot of workers and then says, hey, wait a second, I got all these workers. But they're going to the wrong base. So wisely ends up transferring a whole bunch of them over to his main. And should probably think about taking a third. He knows his opponent is on 2 bases. He wants to keep that going. However, still, the Zerg has managed to tech up faster than the opponent. The Atlas coming on down, that is going to spawn, finish less fast. It takes longer to make than the Iris. And the Iris unlocks Tier 2 for your Zerg. So that's going to basically be a huge... I think this might be a Muta rush, if I'm reading this correctly. I'm not really sure why else you would stay on 2 bases, but to secure that. No, it looks like maybe he's thinking about 3rd bases. So it could be more things than that, but obviously he's adding a lot more hatches over here. So yeah, it could be many things, but on two bases, you're not really going to have the eco to afford all of these hatches. So we'll have to see what he ends up wanting to do. He's got a lot of mineral income, though, and did spike up a lot in terms of workers. Newt only now thinking about taking another base. He's actually been thwarted in this situation because of the Quasilisk. Been pushed away. Obviously, that's, going to be a quick slap. The Vulture coming in here just to see what's going on. Obviously going to be grounded as well. This one taking a look at 12 o'clock. So 4 hatches on the way at the same time, but the... okay, I see. This worker over here is going to be turned into a structure. Yep, it is a Mutath Spire. So I do think that Art of Turtle is a little bit concerned about airplay and wants to gun for mutas. On this side, we have a star pad being made, but that's it so far as air. Obviously, you don't get access to the star port until your Atlas is done. We'll see what... oh, it is... Okay, captaincies. See, this isn't bad into what Art of Turtle is making. These captaincies end up being very efficient at dealing with that if you end up going for things like madcaps. Even still... Oh, here we go. This is cute. So he's going to go ahead and saturate these gas nodes over here on the island using his Gosvaleths. This is indeed something that you can do. And actually, what is the... I'm not sure about the efficiency here. It looks like 3 workers is perfectly efficient for this reservoir. These ones obviously a little bit less so, but they're ridges as opposed to this expanded, enhanced gas node. By the way, you can go ahead and cap your geysers once you're at Tier 2. Doesn't look like we have Art of Turtle too interested in that. He's going pure quas and some mutas to boot. So mutalisks in Cosmonarchy are 2 per egg. That's on the behalf of them being Tier 2 and Tier 2 being such a tech requirement away. Meanwhile, it looks like Newt has secured his third base, so both of our players on relatively equivalent economies. Newt obviously stretching ahead in terms of worker count, although gases are starting to be capped for our Zerg player and not for our Terran player. He's not interested in doing that just yet. He's adding 1 guild hall and producing madcaps out of the other captaincies. He's actually keeping his money very low. I gotta say that I respect that from Newt. But the mutas are going to be caught by this flyover here. We'll see if Newt ends up... Oh, I don't know what he was doing there. I think it's probably the attack move. Yeah, adapting to grid is something that Art of Turtle is doing, because we have grid hotkeys in Cosmonarchy as the default, and you can choose to go back to mnemonic, but there's no pure customization the way that we have it in Remastered. So obviously that's a feature that we still have yet to add. Now, going into sharking territory here, the guild hall could get focused down, but I'm not sure that it's something that is even noted by Art of Turtle. Now, that Madrigal was really important as a pickoff, because it did mean that, there's only one of them, but if there's like 2, 3 of them, you can really get into rough territory here. We got a couple more over here. Should definitely keep in the mobile mode so that they can get that homing missile attack and splash. You can see a lot of these taking a lot of damage. The Madrigal is kind of like a Valkyrie on the ground when it's in its mobile mode. It only fires against air. But rather than sort of, dealing a salvo of missiles, it's just one very heavy hitter splash damage missile. So it's very efficient versus this kind of thing. The run-by is pretty good at managing some of the worker count, but it doesn't really do any critical damage. The only combat unit that it killed was the one Madrigal. We do have some autocrats coming, as well as the captaincies. Churning out nothing but madcaps. So the ground game here is definitely in favor of our Terran player. All of the quasis are great. Maybe you can send off like some of these armies into different locations and try to attack like from the left side, the right side, and the middle. But for now, despite all the gas being harvested, we're not actually seeing too much power come. Lyrilisks are not bad. They actually move across the map very fast. Their movement speed is insane. They're, I would say, a unit that doesn't get utilized very often, so we don't really see what it's capable of. And despite that, though, it obviously has a reputation of being very squishy. And since this army is pretty good at dishing out damage, Newt might end up making it look like the unit is not very good. Maybe this is not the use case for it. We'll find out, though. They do have a bounce attack. It should be pretty efficient at dealing with some of these attacks. So you can kind of think of it as a ground muta in some ways, in that respect. Now, we are going to see the one phalanx deploy in this army. Here come the quasis and the Lyrilisks. The muta is going to be distracting a lot of the initial attacks. The Anseal's getting doven on. None of them have been focused down just yet. Okay, one of them does fall. These autocrats are a really big deal. Only one of them actually on the field, and it is going to get absolutely swarmed. So it looks like Newt moved out with too small of an army here by a considerable margin. And even though the mutas all ended up dying, 11 pairs are about to hatch right now, and that is going to be more than enough for a continuation of this assault. We've got a Cyclops and a Goliath in that anchor, but I feel like it's pretty easy to focus that bad boy down. I love the mine placement over here. Would love one that's like maybe off to the side, maybe above the anchor as well, because even though these ones get cleared or whatever, if the mutas swarm in on top of their ground units, they too will get stunned. And you can see the movement speed of the Lyrilusk. It's actually quite absurd. We got a little bit of a load up here with that Ovaleth. I'm not sure what that's going to do. Oh, unfortunately, jumping straight on into hostile territory here and getting the fight started a little bit early. We don't really have any siege, so Art of Turtle has to bust this with superior numbers, and it's not working out for him. He's got nothing that will stop the Sentinels from piercing, and certainly doesn't really have anything to clean up things like the Autocrats, make a dive on them. Well, maybe he can use the mutas there. Yeah, one of the Autocrats going down. That's a very, I would say, a fairly expensive unit, 150, 150. And they reclaim units that they debuff. Here's more mutas. Not really that much sustain over here. The Shaman's finally kicking in. There we go. A deployment is good. And it looks like Art of Turtle's been held at bay thanks to the support from the Cleric, the Shaman, the Anseal that's now moved in. But these Goswelleths are mining away. Art of Turtle's got plenty of gas coming. Looks like a little bit of anti-air defense somewhere. Okay, down here towards the bottom. And only now do we see... oh, look at this. The Quasilis getting stuck inside the treasury. Now he's out. Going to see if he can chase down that Mason. One more hit will do it. Hey, there we go. Consolation prize as the treasury ends up finishing up. Some reclaimed units over here with the one Shaman keeping them alive. Always cute to see. They decay when they've been reanimated. So it's important to keep them alive with the Shaman or something else. But this base will get quickly counterattacked. There are enough units over here that I think should be good. Got an Autocrat, more Madcaps. Matraval Nest coming, though, for Art of Turtle, so he can diversify his composition a little bit. He should try to stick out and kill this Anseal if he can. If for no other reason than to make it really hard for Newt to respond to any burrowed attackers like the Lekizalisk, obviously, being the only one right now in the game, but still something that you could pivot to versus such a small, tightly packed composition. It looks like these mutas are outside of the Shaman range, unfortunately, but they weren't adding too much to the comp. Now we have Sikralisks coming alongside some Matroleths. We'll have to see if the Art of Turtle is as good at casting that ability and managing the usage of them in general as Nibelheim is. I would hazard a guess to say no, because Nibelheim is very, very learned with that. I didn't even really notice this, but the fact that the Avaleth is also here, it's kind of cute because it means that he could maybe load up not the deployed Madrigal, unfortunately, but maybe the deployed Shaman or something. So here comes the dive. Again, the Muta's stacking up quite a bit. Here come the Matroleths, though. They're going to add Ensnaring Brood to the mix, and they should also be casting their ability, but unfortunately they're just getting picked apart. Newt is very familiar with how to deal with this, and it doesn't really look like Art of Turtle is himself. No abilities being casted over here, and Newt's actually resurrected one of them, and here comes another round of Mutas. Again, the one Matroleth being resurrected means that Ensnare gets applied to things like the Madrigal, which shoot everything, so obviously that's no bueno there. But this force will get cleaned up. Again, Newt moving out with, I think, probably like a half-sized force than what he would really want. But admittedly, he killed a lot of the units that Art of Turtle had, so it's not the end of the world there, per se. Even still, though, his opponent on an additional base means Art of Turtle is not looking too favored for the rest of the match. Still trying to figure out what kind of units to mix together. And I gotta say, he's made a lot of Mutas. He's made a lot of Quasalisks and evolved a lot of them into Lyralisks, and he even made a little bit of Sikralisks and other such units mixed in every so often. The problem that I have for him is that he's not yet figuring out exactly what kind of compositions work best versus what Newt is doing. Newt is combining units from the Captaincy, the Stockade, and the Fulcrum with a bunch of different add-ons to boot, with the Madrigals coming from the Palladium, and of course the Clerics and Shamans coming from the Vestry, the Autocrats coming from the Guildhall, and just, you know, straight up Goliaths, Madcaps, etc. You think about the unique sources of Newt's power, Newt's composition. He's putting together a number of different tech, and he's even started to add starports, which he's going to use for Valkyries to help clear the air. And that, to me, is like, that's the quintessence of what Cosmonarchy is about, and really what RTS games are about in some ways. As Art of Turtle will look to take to the right side of the map here for more expansions, you just got to remember that you're supposed to be building out a composition of additional units and a rich sort of, I guess, tapestry of your units. What kind of army do you want? What kind of army do you need? And Art of Turtle's still very new. I'm not criticizing him here. But this kind of underscores for me, like, if you had to look at the broad spectrum reason why Newt is winning, sure, he's got more workers by a significant margin now, and sure, he had a little bit of economic tempo throughout most of the game, with the exception of the natural going up much faster for Art of Turtle. But the main thing that I would point out is that Art of Turtle has compositions that are very simple and usually made up of 2 to 3 units, whereas Newt is mixing in so many different units, and particularly so many different sources of different units. Another Quasilisk getting stuck inside the treasury over here. It almost looked like he was being tickled by that Mason for a moment. That's pretty cute. Now, we obviously are going to see another move out here from Newt, and I'm not really sure that Art of Turtle has what it takes to handle it. I will note another thing that he's doing that somebody else has done on the casted channel. Alexander, shout out homie if you're watching this. But the Hydrith, then, when you mutate it into the Skibact, you're spending more money than you need to, because you can mutate it directly into the Tethvith, which is the tier 2 version. And that goes much more in your favor. So Art of Turtle's going to try to shut down this 5th base before it can really begin, but the rest of the army is already on the front gates, and Art does not really have anything to hold this back. Look at his money. He could definitely be spending a lot more, but unfortunately for him, he is not. It looks like he's forgotten about his workers over here in the top 12 o'clock location. He's going to go ahead and get rid of it. And a lot of that times, you know, again, I don't mean to cast this in a way that will sound, you know, negative or overwhelmingly like a shit talky or whatever, but I'm just commenting on it for the sake of so people recognize, like, it's going to look really weird, like you're floating a lot of money. I mean, Newt's floating a lot of minerals as well, don't get it twisted. But it's going to look like you're floating a lot of money and that you're a much worse player when you're learning things like, you know, what units do you make and how do you make a composition and how do you make it work? I mean, even though this Skibact came out and that's a mistake because you could just go for the Tethvith, still, you can turn these Hydras into Bactyls and start having a much better performance versus this army, especially if you make a couple more Matroleths. Valkyrie's hunting down where the Droleths are hiding. They're actually going to spot the Gosvalets, and that should make Newt think to himself, wait a second, if he was over here, what if he's over here on the right too? You know, we'll see if he ends up thinking about that. It looks like there's one Shaman over here, but I don't know if it's going to be, if he's going to try to keep the Droleth and turn it into a hatch. Obviously, you can then put some masons on next to the hatch and repair it while it decays, if you wanted to. And it's a lot of heavy work. And here we go. We actually do see the Bactylisks, so that's a pretty good deal for our Zerg player. That will allow him to deal with this bio push a lot more. We're not really seeing any artillery or anything out of Newt. Well, he's dipped into his mineral bank a little bit more as he's gotten a bunch more autocrats and madcaps up. I think some Olympians wouldn't be too bad, but, you know, the main thing that he's going to struggle with is the range of the Bactyls, particularly if he attacks on a height disadvantage situation, but that's not going to happen here. We have Muta Bactyl, but we don't really have any front line. We got some Quasis coming at the very least. The Valks are going to absolutely turn these Mutas into mincemeat, but hey, maybe they'll take a lot of the shots of the Bactyls while they're doing it at the same time. A bit of a flank onto the Shaman from the Quasis in the north. That is actually going to kill a Shaman, which isn't too bad. And also kind of split some of the kinetic penetration shots from the Autocrat. Again, there's no front line here, so as long as you can make a Maginot line, so to speak, you might be able to actually push through this as Newt. However, it's a little bit hard to call right now. There's more Bactyls showing up, though. It does feel like Art of Turtle should be able to handle this situation, since the Shaman is back here not really healing the right things. And it looks like maybe Art of Turtle is slowly getting edified by this reclamation, but I do think he's held, and that's going to extend the game even a little bit longer than I thought. I actually thought Newt would be able to win pretty soon on the push, but I guess he wasn't expecting things like the Bactyls. Still, you shouldn't necessarily push into this situation. There's a lot of stacked up healing and a lot of attrition based on the Autocrats forcing your units to be reclaimed. So you got to watch out for that. Autocrats also, they're doing okay versus the Bactyl since there's no armor pen on the Bactylisk. The Goliath, unfortunately, is going to get whittled down. More units streaming on in. Do we have any additional Bactyls? It doesn't look like it. 17 pairs of Nathrakors just got mutated. But look at the Valkyrie stack eviscerating those Mutas. At the same time, they all get tagged by the Autocrat, so they revive. Is this going to be the final push? This is a very extended fight with reinforcements continuing to stream in, but only 4 madcaps this time for Newt. So there is a precedent that maybe Art of Turtle can whittle through, but it doesn't look like it now. He's got to call GG just based on the fact that all of those were Quasis and there were no more Bactyls. He had to hold on to those like a precious resource. Well, there you go. A relatively new player, but a storied player in Art of Turtle coming in and getting his feet wet with this game. I'd say he's definitely learning to manage the macro a little bit better, and he is figuring out some of the new units like the Bactylisk and what their use cases is. Sure, he's, fumbled a little bit with figuring out exactly how to get to them and how soon he got to them. Had he got to them and chosen them instead of doubling down and tripling down on Mutalisks, he probably would have actually been in a really good spot, strong spot. He could have also mixed in Pertathalors, another unit you get from the Spire, which is like a nice artillery unit for single target. That would have helped with Autocrat sniping and sniping other units in general a lot more than what he ended up going for. So I gotta tip my hat to him. He's learning fast. Newt is a very strong player for us, despite the maybe some of the mineral float that you saw later on there in that game. I think maybe he just kind of thought, oh, my opponent's probably dead. I'm out expanding a Zerg. You shouldn't be able to do that. And maybe he took his foot off the gas a little bit. But despite that, you got to see the Terran push with Tier 2 bio, the Tier 2.5 bio in the Autocrat, and also the nice mix of mech that was earlier on before it fell off into just straight bio air. I didn't mind the Valkyries being included at all. Definitely could have added in like a Zazel Seraph or something for even more powerful dominance. I also got to say that the Matroleth push, where the queens, if you're using StarCraft 1 terms, those units being made, the 7 of them, they're very gas expensive, and Art of Turtle wasn't able to get any value. In fact, they were negative value because they got reclaimed, and then Ensnare was turned against him for a brief period of time. So that was really rough. But, he's learning mechanics. I don't think he expected Terran to be able to reanimate the dead. So that's the kind of thing you can do in Cosmonarchy. I hope you enjoyed this cast. We'll be back with more action pretty damn soon.